And now, another episode of the Game Changers podcast with Sydney and Luke Hurst.
What is up, guys? Welcome back to the Game Changers podcast. Today we are just going to jump right into our guest because we are very excited to have her on. And we have a lot of good stuff to talk about, a lot of stuff on the docket. So let's jump right in. All right, everybody, we have a very special guest today. Her name is Emily Perrin. She is the CEO and founder of Perrin Wellness and Performance. She used to be a collegiate competitive athlete. We are very excited to have her on the podcast today to explain a little bit about what she does and just kind of her insight. So welcome, Emily. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh my gosh, thank you. So excited to be here and dive into all the things.
Yes, all the things. I actually came across Emily's profile on social media, and I've been following it for years. And it really just speaks to post-athletic careers, whether that's college, whether that's like me, where it was just competitive in high school, or even earlier. It's the work that you do is incredible and speaks to so many people. So wanted to thank you for that, and that's kind of how I came across Emily's influence. So can you tell us a little bit about kind of how it started, all of it, if you want to start from your athletic career and kind of go from there? I'd love to hear about your path.
Yeah, well, you're very sweet. I adore your account as well. And yes, we've been following each other for a while, but yeah, man, we're gonna go way back, aren't we? So, I'm a mental health therapist, but I kind of play a couple different roles because I also operate as kind of like in the coaching space as well, for athletes and former athletes. So I just want to make that clear. But I really got into this work from like my own personal journey, which I think a lot of therapists or just people in kind of like helping professions, they do. And I really think that much of why I do what I do and I'm passionate about it is because the things that happened actually outside of sport that really then impacted my sport career. From a pretty young age, I experienced some pretty significant trauma, and that slowly led to just a lot of mental health challenges, pretty pervasive and chronic anxiety, complex post-traumatic stress, depression, suicidal ideation. I've been in inpatient psychiatric care 2 times in my life, and I hope I never go back. I don't wish it on anyone, but I mean, really in my mid 20s, I got out of inpatient for the second time, and I really had to take a hard look at my life. And I moved home with my parents for a little while because I still could not get through the day without having a panic attack. And I guess in many ways you could call it kind of a rock bottom. I think, for anyone that's out there that's listening, that's navigated, suicidal ideation and just some really low points, you feel very hopeless. And I think if you let that consume you, you go to some really dark places. And so I think at that time I was just kind of like, okay, I have to keep trying things. I have to keep exploring things. I have to kind of get curious about any and everything that could help me. And I just started going to yoga. It was really as simple as that. Like, it wasn't this like profound kind of like, oh my God, like spiritual awakening. It was just like, you know what? People keep saying that you should go to yoga and it should be really good for you, and I'm just going to go. So I just went. I mean, every single day I was like, okay, I'm just going to get up. I feel terrible. I'm still having panic attacks, but like, I'm going to go to yoga. And very quickly into, going to daily yoga, I started kind of like absorbing the messages around mindfulness. And yoga is basically a mindfulness practice in motion. And that got me really curious. I was very intrigued. I'm like, what is this? What's happening here, right? When I get on a mat and I really connect to my mind and my body, and it felt like for the first time in my life, I was relating to specifically my body and my thoughts in a very different way. Because when you spend your entire life with particularly anxiety and panic attacks, but also complex post-traumatic stress, it takes a toll on your body. And not only that, I was a college athlete, so I really, in many ways, my physical body had taken a beating, and I really just felt like when I was on the yoga mat, I was experiencing something different. I was being much kinder to myself. I was actually, for the first time in my life, I think, feeling my body. And so I just got curious, and I was like, okay, let's just, go on Amazon and order about like 20 books, right? And let's just like start reading and listening to podcasts. And I was like, like there's something here. And yeah, that slowly just kind of led into a very strong mindfulness practice, and then studying with a Buddhist monk for about a little over a year, and then deciding, okay, I actually want to go back to school, and I want to be a therapist, and I want to help people. And I was lucky enough to be in the Raleigh-Durham area at the time and get my foot in the door working with teams at Duke, which is a heck of a starting gig. Not many people get that opportunity. So I want to say, like, shout out to Chris Pollard, who was the head baseball coach there at the time, gave me a shot, and I thank God for him every single day. But, I started just kind of bringing a lot of what I had been experiencing just out of inpatient in my own recovery. I started bringing that to athletes. I really felt like, man, if I had just had some of these tools and these skills and this practice when I was a college athlete, I think my life would have been completely different. And to be fair, let's take it even further. I think if I had had it as a youth athlete, as a high school athlete, like my life could have literally been different. And so, yeah, that is really what, kind of launched me into this type of work. And more recently, I've gotten very, very interested in post-sport life and what it means to end sport and how that drastically shifts your identity, but also how you relate to yourself and the world around you. And, you meet so many people that are like, wow, like that was my experience too. Or, well, actually, this is what I struggled with. Right? We do not talk enough about that transition and what that's like for people. And so, yeah, more recently I've shifted into working with, especially as a clinician, a therapist, with adults in particular, and a lot of college athletes that are making that transition out of post-sport life. So,
yeah, that's incredible.
I don't know if I.
Sid is out of sports. We both were gymnasts for a while. She was a gymnast till she was a senior in high school, and finished and didn't go to college to do it. So she's in post-sport life. I am soon to be in post-sport life. So she would be able to talk about that more than I can. But I feel like it's a huge thing that nobody really talks about because nobody understands how much of a toll and how much time people put into their lives playing a sport. And then all of a sudden, that whole chunk of your life doesn't exist anymore. And you have to figure out how to be a normal citizen again and figure out what to do and to fill that time. Because without the stuff that you were doing, your mind can go in places you would prefer it didn't. So.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And, I mean, sports is fantastic, and I've gone back and forth between... I mean, I'm sure that this is part of the transition in you sort of hate your sport, like a little bit, like, for the negative parts that it gave you. For a very short period of time when I stopped gymnastics and I was going through all of the rock bottom points that I had, like right afterwards, trying to find my identity and figure out food and exercise and all of these things, I was like, if I didn't do this sport, I wouldn't have gone through these things. But it also wouldn't have made me very similar to you, where it's like I know how to handle them. Sports gives you so many things, friendships and the work ethic and all of these things that make me who I am, then it's worth it. I can't imagine, going through your degree, trying to figure out what you want to do with your life while you're still living the life that you did when you were 5 or 12 or 15. So it's really cool, and I love that you found yoga, which is a whole nother interesting part to it, because I personally struggled with figuring out how to move my body. I was like, oh, you mean like my 4.5 hour practice? Like a 30 minutes is not enough, like I'm not feeling anything in my 30 minutes. And yoga is such a connection that you feel on a different level, and I love that you found that.
Yeah. It's one thing I want to mention that you brought up, which I think is really important for people, is that I call it like the complexity of the sport experience. And what I mean by that is there's so much talk around how great sport is, and it's very glorified. It's a very big part of our society because of particularly pro sports, right, is a main source of entertainment. And so what that means is we see all of these really what I call almost like sexy parts of sport and being an athlete. And at the same time, I think we have to do a better job of calling out and acknowledging the really toxic and harmful parts of sport, and particularly more competitive sport, but also we're seeing a lot of really toxic stuff happen at just like youth recreational sport right now.
Mm-hmm.
And so something that comes up for a lot of former athletes is this kind of like, it's almost like a back and forth battle of like, I'm so grateful and honored that I was able to play a sport and compete at a really high level. And at the same time, it has left me with a lot of really, really hard stuff that I now have to pick apart and go through. For example, totally recalibrating a relationship with my body image,
Yeah.
food, movement. Also just in the way that we talk to ourselves and our self-talk, how we move in the world. I think this is something that, many athletes struggle with when sport ends, and they almost feel bad when they say things or kind of acknowledge that like, hey, sport harmed me in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
And I always like to say, like, you are allowed to say that. You are allowed to
Right.
feel that. And you're allowed
Mm-hmm.
to really acknowledge that, right? Like, we don't have to choose one or the other, right? And I think that's really important. I just wanted to say that because, oh my gosh, like, I am so thankful and grateful, and I wouldn't be the person that I am today if I didn't play soccer at the University of Virginia. And at the same time, there are so many pieces of my career and college sport and sport culture that really did not do me any favors and have
Right.
left a
Yes.
very long legacy of, some really damaging and harmful patterns. So I just want to throw that out there because I don't think we give the permission for people to feel both things, to think both things. And I think
Yes.
that's really important.
Thank you for highlighting that. And I've noticed that it's really interesting as I go through therapy as an adult and in post sport. There are so many times that I actually do it on my own now, but at the beginning I wasn't able to. I connect a lot of my thought processes with gymnastics. Like so many of the things that I do go back to my sport. For example, like when you're in a sport, you don't want to complain about your sport. It's like I got first place, but I didn't do this. My coach said that I didn't do that. Whatever it is, you didn't do something that you're supposed to do, even though you won. Or you go in and you can't come out of the car. You can't come out of the gym. You can't come out of, your workout and say to your parent, "That was awful." Like there's this. I don't know where it comes from, but it's this stigma of like you have to love your sport, and it's so similar in a lot of other aspects of your life. Anything that's wrong, it's like, okay, I love my job, I get paid a bunch, but there's something else. And that but portion, there's so many people that just don't allow themselves to give that permission. And it's so important just to notice it. That like you're allowed to hate your sport every now and then. Like you're allowed to hate the things that make you who
100%.
you are. And it's when you hear it like that, you're like, well, of course I'm allowed to hate something. Of course I'm allowed to, after a really hard workout, I'm allowed to hate it. But when you're in the moment, it's daunting how much effort that actually takes. And a lot of people they do it almost automatically. Like how I did, where I was like, I hit rock bottom, but it was I was the best thing of my life was, my sport, which of course it is, but you're allowed to not have to have that but in there.
I always say, it's the concept of dialectics, right? Like two things can be true at the same time. You can hold space for both. And what I will say is sport culture, sport is a place that doesn't believe in that, right?
Yeah.
Sport is a place that tells you, well, you can't hate your sport. You can't be unmotivated and still be a good athlete. You can't be,
Right.
upset about playing time and still show up and do your job, right?
Hmm.
Sport doesn't like the dialectic, right?
Yeah.
And I think what happens is that becomes the framework for every athlete's mind. And so what I spend a lot of time doing as a therapist, as a nervous system coach with, I mean, I'm fortunate enough to work with athletes who are in, both high school and college. And so I'm lucky because I get to help them start that process a little bit earlier, like
Hmm.
building that flexible thinking, right? Like, no, it's actually totally normal to be unmotivated. You're not a
Yeah.
bad human. You're not a bad person, right? Like, really okay. And actually, it's really healthy. Like,
Yes.
no one's told
Yes.
you that. I know sport hasn't told you that, but it's really healthy. It's actually not physiologically or mentally or emotionally possible to be motivated all the time, right? But sport will tell you otherwise. So that's just one example, right? The motivation piece. But what I will say is that becomes the framework for how then we step into life without sport, and people find very quickly that it just doesn't work. And I,
No.
I think, quite frankly, it was actually interesting. I was reviewing a study. It's a meta-analysis and a lit review. I think it came out in 2024 that is now starting to look at the rise of mental health challenges in athletes when they finish their sport. And American football players having the highest rates of, I think, both anxiety and depression when their sport ends. It makes a lot of sense, right?
Yeah.
What really what really frustrates me is that none of this is really going to get better until sport culture changes. And
Hmm.
that's such a big beast. I don't
Yes.
I don't think it's going
Yes.
to I don't know how much it's going to change before I die, but I'll go
Right.
down with a fight. I mean, I like to think I'm changing sport and sport culture, but there's a lot of things in sport and sport culture right now at every single level. I mean, I'm talking youth, recreational, high school,
Hmm.
club, travel, college, that like has to change. And I think with the wave of mental health awareness, we've seen some progress, but there's we were operating in the deficit, to be fair, right? So we have a lot of catching up to do.
I completely agree with the motivation and how the stigma around any athlete in any sport at any age is you can't be unmotivated, and if you're not motivated at any point, you it's like you're frowned upon and you're not looked up at a higher standard like those some guys who are motivated every day and never have an off day, or they don't like need that extra little bit of motivation, or they wake up and they always want to go do what they need to do that day to get better, instead of where there's some people who still go and do it, they just don't have the same motivation that day that they do. And I'm one of them. I still go, I do all the work that we're supposed to. I push every day, I make sure I'm there early, I get extra work in. But the stigma is, if you're upset about the playing time, or you're upset that you aren't getting the results that you're looking for, that it's your motivation that's to blame, when I think it's the complete opposite. I feel like it's skewed in how people look at motivation and what comes from it.
Yeah, and I think a huge reason for that is in the last decade or so, particularly as social media has taken over our society, all we see are highlight clips and reels, and they're doing documentaries and highlighting the less than 1% of people, right? I posted the other day a stat, that especially for college athletes, like less than 1% of the United States population will ever play a college sport. It's way less than that, but 1% was, sounded nice and whole. And so less than 1% plays a college sport. Now let's talk about professional sport. And then within professional sport, let's look at the top percentage of pros. So the LeBron James, the Michael Phelps, the Simone Biles. What people fail to put two and two together around is that that is not the norm, nor should that be the standard for everyone else, in my opinion. But it is because they're the greatest. but the math doesn't add up, right? And so what we are now finding is that, in particular, I see it a lot at the youth level, right? You have parents and you have coaches talking about, these really, really elite athletes, right? The Simone Biles, the Michael Phelps, and LeBron Jameses of the world, right? And saying, and kind of basically sending the message to their 10, 11, 12-year-old kid, right? That that's the standard, when that really should not be the standard at all. In my opinion, not if you want to actually raise healthy, resilient kids. There's a reason that they are the, 0.1%, right? There is a reason. And what we don't see is the majority of their life, their struggle, or what they're going through, what they've lost, what they're navigating. Do you know what I'm saying? And I think we've done a better job in highlighting, and obviously we have a lot of professional athletes now that are being more vocal around their struggle and their mental health struggle, but we still don't even know the full depth of that. And so I think it's really important that we, again, this has to be reshaped within sport culture, but like the majority of our kids are not going to go on and be the next Simone Biles. They're not. The majority of our kids are not going to go on to play college sport. The majority of our kids, right, need to still be able to play sport, engage in sport, have fun, move their bodies, do it and learn leadership skills and how to communicate with people, right? And how to be on a team, right? Like that is the norm. That is the standard that we should be applying and setting for sport culture. The more that we highlight and we emphasize, right, the journey of these like less than 1% athletes, like, and don't get me wrong, I'm not dissing them, and I'm not saying that they shouldn't be or they can't be role models, and they, we can't kind of like look at their success and career. But what I am saying is we cannot make that the norm, in my opinion. We cannot make that the standard, because we're going to keep having the challenges that we're having with so many athletes right now.
Yeah, it's going to cause burnout, like especially from a young kid to being pushed as hard as they possibly can from that young age. They're going to burn out by the time they're 15, instead of letting them have some time in here and there where if they don't feel motivated, then it's okay. And if you go to the practices still, but they don't have to go out extra all the time. And maybe if you do that, then they get motivated later in life and they do the extra work and they do become these great athletes. But you can't push them early and expect them to want it as badly as you, the parent, or the coach wants it for them, because they have different life experiences and points in their lives. So I fully agree with that part of the mental aspect of sport. You can't idolize, well, you can idolize the 1%, but you can't make that 100% how everybody has to do their sport.
Right. It's like, it's more of like Emily said, it's not the norm, it can be the exception. It's like, okay, well, I want to be a Simone Biles one day, but I have to put in perspective that out of X amount of gymnasts that are in the world, 4 people go to the Olympics. And there are so many other factors like genetics and coaching. And I think that's something that you kind of pointed it out at the beginning. I wish more people would talk about the different factors that go into a LeBron James, to go into a Michael Phelps, like how their bodies are different, how the genetics play, and it's not just how hard they work. It's not the hours they put in. There's so many other factors that I think are important.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're spot on. And, I always am so perplexed because so many people, ask me or, kind of talk about how so many kids really wrap their identity and their worth around sport and being an athlete. And I go, well, of course they do. Why wouldn't? We literally have a society that reinforces and quite frankly tells people that, the best of the best, right, are more worthwhile, right? I mean, we literally, and not to mention, we have a pro sport and now a college sport structure that pays better performing players more.
Yes.
So why would our kids not get that idea in their head? Unless in your home, as parents in your family dynamic, right, you are modeling and showcasing that is not actually the case, right? That your worth, your belonging, your lovability is not tied to what you do or some title like an athlete, right? But the problem is that's not happening in the majority of households.
No,
And
yeah.
more often than not, you have parents that are hopping on the bandwagon and saying, yep, my kid's at 12 years old, my kid's going to be the next Michael Phelps, right? And you're like, how would you know that? Right?
What experience and knowledge?
Probably
Yeah.
not.
Yeah,
Right?
right. But
Probably
that doesn't
not,
make
but
them less.
okay, keep believing that.
Right.
Right. And so, unfortunately, the majority of our kids, of our athletes, are not hearing that you are not your sport, your worth, your lovability is not being an athlete. They're not hearing that. I think I think it's very interesting, and unfortunately, I don't see it changing because of the world and the pay structure, right, of elite sport. But I think so much of I've started doing a lot more with parents and kind of parent education, because it starts in the home, it starts in the family dynamic, and how we're talking and communicating and modeling to our kids that you're more than what you do. You're worthy.
Absolutely.
Regardless of whether you go on to be the next Simone Biles or not.
Right.
And so I think that's really important.
Yeah. I mean, even in my head, and I can't tell you where it came from. I think it was from myself, but where it came before then, doing a sport purely for a scholarship. And that was just the mentality. It's hard to find an identity when you're in a gym or you're at the field, 25 hours a week. It's hard to find out other things that you want to do. What kind of advice do you have for the athlete themselves to have, in things that they can control? A lot of what I dealt with was control. So an athlete that is struggling to find their identity at a young age, and maybe their household doesn't want to adapt. It's, very traditional. What would you kind of say, how can they find their identity within themselves?
Yeah, I mean, I think you make a great point in that. And, I think one thing we always have to consider, especially for athletes that are still living at home, which means, you're talking, when I think of an age range here, and we're talking quote unquote identity, right, which really starts to form long before coherent thought process starts to happen. But let's just say athletes that are, I personally think that like a U8, U9, right, is kind of more so what we're talking about. That's where you often see more of quote unquote like organized sport, as opposed to like hot shots where like you roll up and it's like 3 and 4 year olds and it's chaos, and like that's
Yeah.
not, I guess it is organized sport, but I'm thinking more when you trickle into the like U8, U9, U10, all the way up until, senior in high school. You're living in a household, and that household and the dynamic of the household is going to be very influential in how you see yourself and how you relate to the world around you. So one of the things that I talk to a lot of parents about, and I'm a very strong advocate of, is kids need to try a bunch of different things. They need to, even within sport, we should not be having sport specialization at 10 years old, right? They need to try a bunch of sports. They need to try art class or play, or what are your interests? What is fun to you? What do you find interesting? And also what parents don't really understand is that a kid's brain is not wired to understand commitment in the way that adults do. And so part of the problem that I see is that, many parents are holding their 11, 12-year-old kid to the standard of a full-fledged adult, which is when you make a commitment to do something, you do it, even if, right, you're miserable and it's actually negatively impacting your self-worth. A 12-year-old doesn't understand that. They don't understand commitment. They don't understand that, oh, okay, yeah, like when I go interview for a job, right, and I take a job, like I need to probably stay with the job longer than 2 weeks, right? Their brain does not operate like that. So we have to really understand that kids are going to change their minds, and they're going to say, oh my God, I went to art class and it was so much fun and I loved it. And then 2 days later, they might be like, nah, I don't really like art anymore. And that's very normal. Your kid is not disciplined. Your kid is not motivated. Your kid is not, intentionally trying to not commit to things. Their brain just doesn't operate that way. It should always be, right, the nurturing of that. okay, maybe art's more of a, touch and go thing, but like you really like soccer and you're loving soccer. Okay, great. Soccer for the fall. And then the kid might come back and say, I don't want to play soccer in the spring. I don't like soccer anymore, right? And you go, okay, great. Let's try baseball, right? So this ability to like let kids move and flexibly explore and experiment with a lot of different things, I think is so, so important. And we just stifle that. Go play. Go out into the backyard and play, right? Like free play. Go invent some game, right? If a kid is living in a home where that is not accessible, they're going to have a wildly different experience than a kid that has had the room and the freedom to do that. And if it would be if I could create Emily's world, right, I would create a school and education system where every semester or quarter, or however we were doing classes, you had to do some type of movement-based activity. So that could be a sport, but that could also be dance. It could also be ballet or whatever, right? And you have to do, some type of, whether it be like creative arts or an instrument or cooking or something, right? Like in Emily's perfect world, which is never going to exist, right? But like that would be, you're always doing something, both of those combined, right? Not just sport. You're not kind of pigeonholing yourself into just sport. You're exploring a wide variety of things, because I think by that exploration, we get to know ourselves.
You're so right.
We get to explore who we are and how we think and how we feel. And sports specialization comes in and kids get very narrow-minded.
Yes.
And then they think that sport defines them because that's the only thing they know.
Yeah.
They don't know that they're good at anything else. Yeah.
Well, they don't believe it either.
Yeah. Right. And then when it comes time they can't play that sport anymore, or that sport doesn't pan out the way they thought, they don't know anything else. They don't have the ability to, okay, well, I have this now that I can go to, but they haven't never experienced something else other than that one thing they've been doing their whole life. And then then they're in the hole a little bit and they start to panic.
Yeah.
Even as an adult, it's so important, like you said, to go from one sport to another, but as an adult to like go from one job to another or change majors in college, not because you failed, but because that's how the human mind works.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And I think, that is very relevant for when sport ends. You really need to give yourself a lot of grace and a lot of permission as you step into a life and a world without sport. Kind of be all over the place, but also kind of just go where your mind and your heart want to take you. So for example, and I think this is a really big one for movement in particular, because so many athletes, whether they admit it or not, and very more often than not, it's female athletes, really struggle with the relationship to body and to movement, and trying to kind of recalibrate how I move my body in ways that are actually enjoyable and I like, because that's really never been a thing for many athletes, right? So I'll never forget, just like the experience of, I kid you guys not, like going into my first spin class, my first cycle class after college, and just being like, what did I just experience? Because I was just on a bike, moving my body to music, a playlist that was very good, right? Like my instructor was great. I enjoyed it, right? And like everybody in the room, right, is like jamming out, but also like working out and moving our bodies, right? I was like, what did I just experience? Because that was actually like highly enjoyable. I get to choose how I move my body. I can get to just like try a bunch of different things, and Pilates, and what the heck is bar, and then also giving myself permission to not go back and not like it. When you're a college athlete, or you're, an athlete that has structure, right? You're not allowed to say no. Yeah. You're not allowed to pivot from the workout packet or the lift or whatever, right? Like you just have to put your head down and do it. Even if it's not fun and enjoyable. So I will also never forget the experience of going to a bar class and being like, that was the most miserable thing I've ever done in my entire life, and I will never go back. And I haven't gone back.
I've never been, so I can't speak to that. But yeah, no, I've been to classes like that. Yeah. You're like, why do people choose to do this?
So yeah, it's exploration. Like I think the two words that I give to a lot of former college athletes in particular is curiosity and exploration.
I like that.
Because you really haven't had a lot of that, especially if you're a college athlete. There hasn't, Luke, this, like there isn't a lot of that in your sport career. So
Yeah, there's none of that. There's no feeling of what to do next because you're so grilled and in on what do I do now. Like right now, we're practicing. Well, we just finished, but we practiced this fall 4 days a week and lifted 3 days a week. You don't have time to think about what's after college, especially for the D3 athlete. None. So there's no thought about that last day or that expiration of what we have to do afterwards. So
yeah, I was talking to a really good friend of mine. He was like professional lacrosse player, like best guy to ever play the face-off position. His name's Greg Grenlian, and he and I have talked at length about his transition to pro-sport life. And I always say, and in our conversation, I was kind of talking about like, when do we actually have to start talking about the end of sport? And I always say at the college level, you should be talking about it day one, freshman year. You don't know when your sport career is going to end. And I've worked with many players that have had career-ending injuries, most of them being concussions. And I mean, talk about something that is, mind-altering, right? Not only just dealing with the long-term impact of many, many concussions, but then also your world is ripped out from beneath you, which is why I think we have to get more proactive and the conversation has to start.
Yeah. Well, you just have to prepare. You have to prepare, but not expect it to happen, but it's going to happen at some point. And I think starting the conversation, Emily's perfect world sounds fantastic to me, because that's where people talk about what type of, I mean, I was like, where can I sign up for this? Like, come on. It's people coming in and being like, okay, so when you're an adult, food affects your body differently, right? This is what you're going to need if you decide to go do a spin class. There's so many times in my sport, and I can't speak to other sports, but it was like you work out so often and so much that you can eat whatever you want. And that, like you said, the body mind disconnect I had to learn to trust my body, because all I was focusing on was hearing things from other people. It was, all I could trust was other people. I can't trust myself to do anything, the basic things in life. And so I think it's so important, like you said, like from day one, have those nutrition classes of, this is what happens when you're in sport, and this is how, like, just understanding. And I think there's a lot of people that,
what I have seen in my own experience, but this is also backed by a lot of research around what we call attachment. And attachment basically says we come into the world having to attach to other people. Baby is born, it literally cannot survive without another person taking care of it. So we are biologically hardwired to connect to others, and we have to do that. And that connection that happens between a small child and a caregiver is very, very influential, because those really set the foundation for our core beliefs around the world, about the world, our kind of concept of who we are and what we deserve from other people and the world around us, right? And the ability to feel good enough, right? So I think what sport culture doesn't really understand, that the success or the resilience of an athlete and wherever they go in their career is not just about what happens at sport. It's not just about the tactical and the technical X's and O's. And it's really not just about the mindset and how an athlete thinks. It's much more than that. The athletes that are the most resilient, that handle adversity really well, that have the most grounded sense of self-worth, that, I am good enough and it's okay to actually fail. I can go out and I can have a bad game or a poor couple of practices, and I know I'm still okay, right? I know that I'm fundamentally still lovable and worthy, and I belong, right? Those athletes had what we call secure attachment. Those athletes grew up in homes with parents that from day one reinforced the message that you are lovable simply because you're born. You belong simply because you're a human being, right? And you're worthy because you're a part of our family, right? Yeah. Not because of whatever you do on the sport field. Right.
Those are just additions. Mm-hmm.
They're just additions, and is a pattern time and time again that I see with the athletes that I work with, right? That feel settled in who they are, know that at the end of the day, it would be really hard if sport ended, right? Or if they could never play sport again, but they know that they would still be, right?
They'd be
Um,
okay.
a worthy, lovable human being.
Yeah.
I'm telling you.
I feel like that's perfect. If every family and parent could hear that and actually listen to it and implement that into their households, it would be so much better as a
Emily,
society and as a sport culture, because they're true. Their kids don't feel so much pressure, and I feel like parents are like, if they don't have the success that they wanted to in their sports career, then they live vicariously through their kids. I feel like it's just a cycle that continues generation to generation, and it doesn't stop until someone either achieves that goal or they snip it in the butt and say, well, I'm going to love you no matter what you do athletically because you're my son, daughter, and you're going to be a great person in society aside from your athletic achievements.
Yeah.
And I just don't think that happens enough.
Do you think that it's...
No, I'm telling you right now, it doesn't.
I was going to ask if you think that from generation to generation it's getting better. Or, I mean, obviously there's a lot of work still to be done, but do you think that it's...
I think it's getting worse, if you want me to be honest with you. And the
like
reason I think
NIL?
it's getting worse is because, yeah, I think technology is making it worse. I think social media is making it worse.
Yeah.
I do. I mean, we know statistically that about 50% of people do not get what I was talking about in terms of secure attachment. So you're quite literally saying half of the world, half of kids, half of people don't get that.
Yeah, that's not a good number.
Astounding, right?
No.
And again, I think it's more complex because
Agreed.
we know that technology is, so one of the really interesting pieces about what we're talking about in terms of attachment and this kind of like where we derive our sense of self-worth and belonging is through what we call our social engagement system. The social engagement system it's embedded into human beings, and it's really run through what we call the autonomic nervous system, but particularly what's called the parasympathetic ventral vagal system. And that is, it really lives in the face, right? Our ability to shift and move our facial expression, the ability to smile and eyes light up and tone of voice and body language and posture, right? This ability to connect with other people. What's really interesting is that social engagement system is a really profound piece of how we first learn as infants that we're okay and we're loved and we're being taken care of, and someone's what we call attuning to us. What's really interesting is that technology is profoundly impacting our social engagement system because we're spending all of our time here. And people can't see this, but I'm sticking my face in my phone. It's really bad. And not only that, but we're giving kids technology far too young. And screens, technology changes the brain.
Yeah.
It actually rewires our brain. And so, thankfully, right, we're having more and more research on this. In my opinion, we really should be like screen free until they're like 16. That's really my opinion. But,
Wouldn't that be ideal?
It would be.
Like
I mean, that's just me. But we know that screens are really changing and kind of altering how we connect with people.
It's definitely like there's not just one thing that you kind of have to fix. It's like, okay, we have to fix people's mindsets, but there's so many different places that they're getting these from. It's not just we go and we talk to this sports club about how to, be a better coach and understand humans. It's like there are so many other deeper layers, especially now that there's a lot of information and things that people are seeing that you can't control. So yeah, I definitely agree. I think, Simone Biles comes out and she talks about her mental health at the Olympics, and then you have, that's great and all, but there's that it's still not fully accepted because the information from so many different places is about that.
And I feel like you saw how much hate she got when she came out and said that when she was doing vault and beam that she was getting lost in the air and it was bothering her mentally, because that's a really secure thing when you're a gymnast, when you really can't feel where you are in the air. It's scary because you're twisting, you're doing too many flips, and you have no idea where you are, so you have no sense of where you're going to land, and it was bothering her mentally, so she couldn't compete. and people were blasting her for that. And I feel like we, instead of blasting her for coming out about her mental health, we should have been praising her for actually coming out and speaking out about it, and instead of shaming it, because then other people who are dealing with other mental health issues in other sports are now also scared to come out and think that their mental health issues aren't validated. That is a dangerous stigma that we see on the biggest gymnast in the world is saying something and it's being hated on.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and you're right. And Sid, I think you make a great point that yes, we need these athletes speaking up. We need to believe them, right? We need to validate their experience, right? Not shame them. But at the same time, I always say, like, them sharing and speaking about it in a documentary doesn't change systems. It doesn't change structure. It doesn't make change, like fundamental changes, right? To sport culture that really need to be changed in order for mental health to be protected, if that makes sense. It's needed. Yes, we need to validate them, and you're 100% right. It doesn't make structural change, which is really needed in order for all of this to move the needle.
Right. Yep. Absolutely.
I have one last question for you, though.
Yeah.
Um, what with all the teams that you've worked with, I saw that you worked with Duke baseball. Obviously, because I play baseball, so I've seen that. And I see that you work with some PLL players and other athletes around the professional sphere and college sphere. What is the most rewarding part of your job, and why? Like, is it the helping of younger kids? Is it the helping of older adults? Like, what is the most rewarding part for you?
Oh, that's a great question. So I think my answer is going to come from, my social work brain and my trauma therapist brain. And a big part of the social work profession, but also trauma informed care, is really coming from what we call a strengths based or empowerment model. And a large part of, a strengths based and empowerment model is like what we call normalizing or humanizing our experiences. And what I have found is, and it does not matter what age, what level, it can be college, professional, it can be a high school kid. I don't work with anyone below ninth grade, so I just work high school and up. It doesn't matter. I've seen this across the board for over 7 years now, and I personally have experienced this a lot in my own life, is we not only struggle with things like anxiety, depression, making mistakes, failing, going into what we call a quote unquote slump, right? Negative self-talk, low motivation, performance challenges, life challenges. We not only struggle with those, but we feel like we are abnormal because of that. They come into the session and they're like, why is that happening? I'm so not normal. I'm the only one that this happens to, right? Like, why can't I figure it out? Why is this such a thing for me, right? And it's self-shaming, right? It's further beating themselves up, right? For the struggle, the challenge, the problem. Does not matter what age. I think one of the coolest experiences, it literally gives my entire body chills and tingles, because so much of the work that I do is first and foremost removing that. You cannot work with the actual challenge. You cannot work with how to handle making mistakes or negative self-talk or even just anxiety and depression if you continue to beat yourself up for that. You can't actually work with it, right? Until you remove that added self-shame or beating yourself up or self-judgment. So a lot of my work is actually starting there. Hey, let's normalize this. You know what? I'm going to validate this. This actually makes a lot of sense. You're a human being. You're an athlete, right? I've had 100 athletes navigate the same thing. The more that we normalize and humanize, they can develop that for themselves. And the coolest thing by far, it's like one of my favorite things, right, is when that then becomes their norm. It is so fun. It is incredible, because that right there, it literally, like, sometimes it can make me cry, because I'm like, that is the whole point right there. Like, I don't care if you ever get better at navigating mistakes or failure, right? I don't care, right? Like, the fact that you start accepting yourself, start normalizing, start validating yourself, right? You start removing that tendency to just call yourself again, a basket case, or like, I'm so weird. Why do I deal with that? It's the coolest thing on the earth to me.
Love that. That is like, it honestly is the coolest thing because I still do that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like, oh my gosh, I'm crazy for thinking this, or I'm whatever it is, and you're not. And I love that that's your driving force, and it makes complete sense. And I think that's so cool. It
Yeah.
really is the coolest feeling.
Yeah. And particularly for athletes, they will come in and tell themselves that they're mentally weak. I'm Because I make mistakes or I get frustrated or I have low motivation, I'm mentally weak. There's something wrong with me. I'm like, no, you're not mentally weak.
Nope.
You're not
No.
weird. It's really cool when athletes get to see that for themselves and can really give, I kind of then start taking a back seat, right? I don't need to be the
Hmm.
one to kind of bring that to the table. They're doing it for themselves. It is best feeling in the world.
Yeah, when that light bulb goes off and they're like, wait, I'm actually not alone, and I
Hmm.
actually am not. Yeah, not crazy. That's awesome.
Hmm.
Um, we need more people like you. I did. I have to say. I mean, athletes who do not talk to someone about this kind of stuff, and I'm hopefully this podcast helps a little bit just to kind of break that barrier. But it is so important just to recognize those things because it's all in your head, and so in a world of seeing things and needing a visual to feel valid, whether it's an injury or a medal or a trophy or something. Being able to have something that's not seen, but knowing that you're like everybody else is really cool. So I love that. That's a really good driving force to get you up in the morning.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's doing a pretty good job so far, so no complaints.
Yeah. How many years have you been pursuing this career?
7.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
You
Uh,
have your own practice.
yeah.
That's awesome.
But I think I'm going on my 8th year next year.
That's awesome. Very successful. Get your when did you start your own business? Like your own performance.
7 years ago. So I started
Okay.
Perrin Wellness and Performance about 7 years ago, and I actually started that before I became a therapist. So I was doing that for about 2 years, almost 2 years, and then I decided I wanted to go back to school. So I was actually doing both. I was running my business full time. I was going to school full time as well, and COVID hit. So there was that mess, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And then ever since then, I've been doing both. So I work as a clinical therapist. I run my own company. I'm an adjunct professor at Drexel. So I do a bunch of
Do
lots of
all the
different stuff.
things.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, we have a few fun questions
Great.
that
Let's do
we
it.
love to end with. Kind of, listen, I am the kind of person, and again, I have now learned it's not a flaw, but I like my social battery is from like this deep conversation. But we are going to go into the fun questions because those are fun. Um,
Always have to. You have to.
oh, you always have to end on a good note. The first question is, you have been around a lot of sports and everything. What is your favorite sport/sports team and why?
People always think I am bonkers, and some people have told me that I'm actually like crazy for this, but like I don't follow sports teams. Like people have to understand that like that's my job. That's my livelihood is working with sports teams. So like
Yeah.
I don't really like in my fun leisurely time, like I don't follow a team. And I also grew
Yeah.
up in Charlottesville, Virginia. So like we don't have any like professional
Nothing.
affiliation.
No.
I more so have always followed players, particularly
Mm-hmm.
because I went to UVA and then, I had a lot of friends that, went into the NFL or the NBA, right? So I would always just follow players and careers. The teams that I love and I follow are the teams that I work with.
Yeah.
Part of, what I do for a living really requires me to integrate into the team system, and be around and go to practice and interact and communicate with players and coaches. Follow are the teams that I work with, and there's been many over the last 7 years.
Oh, yeah. And I bet it's really cool. I can imagine that is way better than watching someone you don't know, never met. on the Eagles get a touchdown and
Totally.
you're like, don't
I
care.
think so. Being able to
Yeah,
lift an ACC trophy or a Big Ten trophy, it's been, those have been the highlights of my career.
so cool.
And it's even more special because you are involved and you're invested. It's just like the relationship right
Yeah.
there of like, care so much, and I genuinely love watching the joy, right, that
Hmm.
explodes at those championship games, or like when
Yeah.
everybody's holding that trophy up, and knowing the hard work and the blood, sweat, and tears that they've put into that is
Hmm.
just and being privy to that. I mean, I
Yeah.
do not take for granted my job. My role, you have to have a lot of trust to bring someone in like me into a program. Like, I don't
Yeah.
take that lightly. When head coaches reach out to me and want to bring me in, and not only that, but the relationship continues for several years. I mean, there's some teams that I've worked with for over 4 years, right? Which means I've seen a full cycle of their kids. I don't take that lightly, and it is really, a huge honor to me. So those are
It's awesome.
my favorite teams.
What do you do in your free time? Like, not no, that came off the wrong way. I
No, no, it came off perfectly because I don't have a lot of free time, but when I do have free time, I'm generally working more. I don't have a great work-life balance, and I know it's a problem. I read a lot. I'm a fantasy junkie. Like, I've read like
love
over
that.
80 books this year. Fantasy junkie. Oh yeah, Luke's face is hilarious. I read a lot. I'm also, I love art. I'm not good at it, but like, I'm taking a clay class. I spend time in nature. I move my body. I don't know, hang out with friends.
Right.
I'm a pretty boring person, to be honest with you.
Yeah. I love that.
I will sit and read a sports article that's like it could be 500 pages long, and I will sit there and read it in like probably 3 hours. But if you give me a novel that's 500 pages long, I will fall
Yeah.
asleep in the first 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I love to read. It's so
I
funny because
love
I,
it.
I really didn't like it until after college, but now I'm,
Hmm.
I'm obsessed.
Well, you get to choose what you want to read. So,
Very true.
um, so my next question is, if there was a documentary or if it was the book version of a biography,
Yeah, yeah.
who who would play you in this movie or this book or the movie based on the book?
You guys, here's how I'm going to answer this. I think genuinely, truly, I'm going to use Inside Out as my. Hopefully, people know the movie Inside Out, Inside Out
Good
1 and
movie.
Inside Out 2. I would probably be a combination of joy and anxiety. That would be me. I'm a
That's
mosh. Like,
me.
if you mix joy and you mix anxiety, that's me. I will say, like, if anybody out there watches or has been watching the show Nobody Wants This, with oh my god, why am I all of a sudden blanking on the
Kristen Bell. Is
character?
it Kristen Bell?
Yes, sorry,
Yes.
Kristen Bell and
Whatever his name
Adam,
is.
what's his name? Yeah, I
Yes.
I think that show is hilarious, and I do see like a lot of actually both of those characters in myself. So like
Yes.
maybe if we like could like even combine them a little bit. Although I do find there to be some very like red flag and kind of annoying behaviors in both of them in season 2, but that's okay. We're
You
gonna
said
put
keep
those
those out of
over
the
to the side.
meth.
Yeah, we're gonna keep those out
The
of the
meth
mix.
character, they can keep those. Yeah.
Like, I think I'm pretty like I'm definitely a nerd, but I'm also definitely like I mean I think I'm kind of funny. I think I am. Maybe
You
other
share the
people
same kind of humor
wouldn't
that Luke
agree,
and
but
I do, which is
yeah,
very
yeah, yeah.
dry. Yeah.
Very dry. Yeah, yeah.
Very dry.
Self-deprecating. Very much. So yeah,
Yes.
hopefully
The
that
one,
that gives you
yeah.
a good answer.
It does, actually. It's so much better than being like, oh, Tom Holland. Like, it's like, no, but listen, I'm going to build my own man.
Yeah, yeah. I'm gonna mosh it together.
Yes. I love it. I love it. While you were saying that, I was trying to figure out what color anxiety and joy would be when you put them together, and I think it's brown.
You think? I think it would be more like a burnt, like Tuscan orangey-ish type
Also a
of
pretty
deal.
color. I like
I
that
think so.
better.
I mean, it's my character, so yeah, but something trendy.
Yeah. Like the color that people go into the hair salon. It's like, make me fall. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
That's,
yeah.
yeah.
Hmm.
Okay, last question that I had. Dream vacation. If you could go anywhere, or if you have been somewhere and you would want to go back ASAP, where is it? Where would it be?
It is a life goal of mine to play with elephants. So I have a couple options there. South Africa or personally Thailand. Like I want to go to Thailand. So yeah, and go to an elephant sanctuary and play with elephants because I think they're the most incredible creatures on the earth. Hopefully one day I will be able to get myself there and just frolic with the elephants. It's really all I want in life.
Yes. Oh, they're so sweet.
I'm very into art. I love history. So France is definitely on the bucket list as well.
Yes. Yes, I love Europe. When I've actually the only time I went was recently, and it's just baffling how much history they have in relation to America. America
Mm-hmm.
has nothing,
Yeah.
no
Yeah.
history.
So
Yeah. Mount Rushmore. That's
yeah.
about it. Well, Emily, is there anything else that you would like to add before we let you go and enjoy the rest of your night?
No, you guys have been great. I hope I talk about self-deprecating. I always get off these things and I'm like, I really hope that I said something coherent and whoever is out there listening thinks I know what I'm saying. I think we've had a really great conversation. I think we've touched on a lot of different things and just super
Yes.
honored and thankful to be here.
Thank you so much for joining us. It was really refreshing to hear a lot of what you said and to say it in a way that made sense to probably every single different kind of person that listens to this podcast. So, thank you for that, for being very authentic and giving us some insight. I really appreciate it.
Always. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Absolutely. We hope to have you back someday. Thank you.
Absolutely. Bye, guys.
Oh my gosh. I loved that. Truly, I am the kind of person that just gets fueled off of conversations like that. So I hope y'all enjoyed that episode and that this interview as much as we did. Emily is amazing, and you got to go follow her on Instagram and give her some love because that was incredible. She is so intelligent, so educated, and really just so down to earth. So we thank her for being on, and we hope you enjoyed this episode as much as we did and had a lot of fun and learned something. So we will see you next week when the Game Changers podcast returns.